Today we kind of are talking about some of the different challenges that are going on in the government and how George Washington is trying to prove his point that the government is going to enforce its laws and is a powerful government. So we will start with what's been going on in the Northwest Territory. So you want to get that down there for Northwest Territory, and here's the United States kind of currently as stands. And so what he thought needed to be done was he saw that the country needed to be peaceful and not be going into wars and fighting with each other in order to prosper. He knew if there was military action going on anywhere that it would become a problem. It could be big time a problem, but sometimes it was hard to stop because of the claims, the land claims, people claiming land all over the place. All right, and there were three major groups that were kind of competing for the lands in the area. You had the British competing for lands, you had the Spanish, and you had the Native Americans, and then obviously the United States. But let's start with the British, and we're in the section Securing Northwest Territory. The British were claiming land. Where was it that they still had forts in this country? Where did they still have forts? And if you didn't read it for today, then you need to get looking through that section right now. Where did the British still hold forts in the United States? Max? North of the Ohio Valley, which what we'll put down is the Great Lakes area. So the British held land still in the Great Lakes area. So right around here, the British still had forts. So they still claimed land, and they were competing for land here. And they were supporting the Native Americans because they wanted to continue to be able to have access to the fur that the Native Americans were trading and selling to them. Okay, and that is your British people. Now you also have the Spanish who are still over here as well. And where is it that they are holding a bunch of land in North America? Dev?
West of Mississippi.
West of the Mississippi. So the Spanish and elsewhere, the Spanish have all of this. They also have Florida, and they also have the port of New Orleans. So it looks like they have a lot of land. Yeah, I guess they also kind of, I suppose this would be part of theirs too. And then you've got the Native Americans competing and claiming some land as well. And where are the natives claiming most of the land, where they kind of still hanging out and claiming land that they say is theirs, but really considered part of the United States? Where are the natives claiming land? Where are the natives? Brett?
Right above Kentucky.
Okay, and what do we call that area right now? What that area is called? What's that area? Lindsay? It's not the southeast, right? North of Kentucky would not be the southeast. What's north of Kentucky, Dev?
Northwest Territory.
This is the Northwest Territory. Okay, so now you've got the natives in the Northwest Territory hanging around by the British. So that's our area, and George Washington really wanted to secure this land, so he sent troops over to the Ohio River Valley, which is in the Northwest Territory, and right away, in 1790, the American troops got beat down by some warriors, some natives. Okay. After a second defeat, then Washington ordered another army out west as well, and they clashed back and forth. And it says on August 20th, 1794, a force of around 2,000 natives clashed with Anthony Wayne's troops. The site was covered with trees that had been struck down by a storm, and the Native Americans were finally defeated in what became known as the Battle of the Fallen Timbers. Hey! Hey, thank you. How are you, Tara? Oh, yeah, Nate, great. Hey, Nate!
I was doing that gone dance from Chinese gone.
Again?
And
In the band room?
I meant to do that.
Okay. All right. So that's kind of what was going on in the Northwest Territory. You got George Washington sending these troops. Once you flip it to 300, we're not going to take a ton of notes on that section, but the Native Americans, they retreated to Fort Miami, which is not Miami, Florida, by the way. It's by Lake Erie. And it kind of, that battle of those fallen timbers kind of crushed their hopes of keeping any land in the Northwest Territory. So that was a positive thing for the Americans. There was a treaty called the Treaty of Greenville, which the natives agreed to surrender most of that area to the United States. So we're not going to take notes on that section, but it's kind of important to know that we were able to secure that land by sending a bunch of troops over. All right. Something going on in our own country during George Washington's time as president. One thing it was called was there was a whiskey rebellion, and this took place shortly after the Battle of the Fallen Timbers. And this whiskey rebellion came across. It happened, and it had to do kind of coincided with what was going on with Alexander Hamilton's financial plan. Alexander Hamilton, what was his job in the government? Remember what Hamilton's job in the government was? What's his role? What's his role in the government, Max?
Secretary of Treasury.
Secretary of Treasury, and so since he's the Secretary of Treasury, he advises the president on what types of things. Braden?
What to do with the economy.
What to do with the economy and the money. Okay, and one thing he came up with was this three-step financial plan. I want you to write that question out, and I want you to answer it. What was his three-step financial plan? Try to do it without using your notes or your book to see what 3 steps you remember. And then we'll come back and talk about them. Okay, so pay off war debt, raise government revenue, set up a national bank. Those are all part of his financial plan. Well, in order to pay off the war debt and raise government revenue, what were some things that had to be done? How are they going to raise money? Katie?
Tax imported goods.
Tax imported goods and tax other goods within the country. So, one of the things that they taxed, one huge thing that they were taxing was what? Hunter?
Whiskey.
They were taxing whiskey. Ooh, there it is. So the government put a tax on whiskey. So basically this conflict came about because of the tax on whiskey. And the tax on whiskey came about because of this financial plan that Hamilton set up. Okay? So there was a large group of people that this really upset. Who did it upset? Abby, who did this upset, this tax on whiskey? What group of people do you think it would upset? No. Nick?
Oh, the farmers.
It upset the farmers. And they were very angry. Okay. Why were they so angry about a tax on whiskey? Jacob?
They make the ingredients for it.
Yeah, they grow crops such as wheat and rye. Hang on. They grow the crops such as wheat and rye, which is, they're grains that they wanted to sell. But it's hard for them to get, well, it's not hard. Well, it is hard to get wheat and rye to the market to sell. Why is it so difficult to get them there? Why is it difficult to take wheat and rye and the different grains to the market to sell, Hunter?
Because they didn't have cars and they had to carry it all by hand.
Yeah, they had to carry it. They had to, with the horses had to pull it, and the roads were horrible. And so they had trouble getting their grains to the market. So instead of trying to get their grains to the market that way, what they did was they turned their whiskey, their wheat and their rye into whiskey. And so not only was it easier to take to the market, they were able to get much more, okay, there. So they were selling much more, making much more money. And plus, they usually had a little bit, not very much money, so they were able to trade things for the whiskey, okay? So this tax made the whiskey prices higher, and they were making less amount of money, so it was really upsetting these farmers. So to resisting this tax, well, what were some things they did, and we've seen this in the past, what did they do to start off to show how upset they were about this tax? Stephanie, what did they do right away? something familiar that they did before when the British taxed them. Brennan, specifically tell me, how did they do that? You know how they did that? Not yet. Max?
They beat up a tax collector, put him with tar and feathers, and stole his horse.
Good. They beat up tax collector, they tarred and feathered him, they stole his horse. And then what they did was after that, kind of stuff, then what did they threaten to do? Abby? They threatened an armed attack on Pittsburgh. Okay, so with an armed attack getting ready to happen, we saw this stuff when the British were taxing us, and it's not something that is going to be a positive thing for the government if it happens. It would basically undermine the government and show that the government is weak and that the people can continue to resist the law. So what did Hamilton, Washington's Secretary of Treasury, urge Washington to do? What did he give him a suggestion? He said, I think you should do this. What did he say that he should do? Braden?
Enforce the tax and crush the whiskey rebellion.
Yeah, you need to enforce that tax, you need to enforce the law, you need to put down the rebellion. Okay? So in October of 1794, what happened? What happened in October 1794? Marley.
General Henry Lee with Hamilton on the side led an army of 13,000 soldiers
To do what?
put down the uprising.
Yep, so 13,000 soldiers were sent into western Pennsylvania to put down this uprising. As news started to come across that the army was on its way, a lot of rebels fled, but the troops were able to snatch up some people and they put them in prison. So Washington proved his point and showed that the government has the power to enforce its laws, it's going to enforce its laws, and these things aren't going to happen throughout the country. Okay? So while all of this is going on, this is one huge thing, one huge task for the president to deal with, but while all of that is going on, over in France, there are some issues as well. France is having its own problems, and you wonder why that has to do with us. Well, it does. The French Revolution is going on about the same time that everything's going on back home, so the president has a lot of tasks and things to deal with. All right, so the French Revolution kind of started off because, well, number one, it was inspired by the Americans. The French were inspired by the Americans, but what was the problem going on in France that really led to a revolution? What did they say led the people to rebel against their government? Abby?
Financial crisis.
They were having a financial crisis. The kings, the barons, and so on, they were living this great life of wealth and treating the people of France very, very poorly. They were living in poverty, and their life was not very good. Okay? So it kind of led the people to rebel against the government because they saw that the colonists rebelled against the British and they, got their freedom. So they thought they could do the same thing. What was it that the French people were demanding out of their government? What did they want? Brooke?
Liberty and equality.
They wanted liberty and equality. That's what they demanded. Freedom, equality, not to live in this poverty anymore. All right? So at first, when the revolution started, the Americans, we supported them. But then it became really, really violent. Way worse than our revolution, okay? Thousands of citizens were massacred. And what did they end up doing to their own king? What did they do to their own king, Austin?
Executed him.
They executed him by what?
As guillotine.
Guillotine. They beheaded him. And beheaded his wife, too. Okay? So, they were so upset, they executed their king and queen. The picture in the book there shows how the execution by guillotine. Okay? So then the French people were, way on top of their game. They were really happy with themselves, and they thought that they could just take on the world. Or not the whole world, but they declared war on Britain, Holland, Spain. Okay, well, that became a problem for us. This is when we stopped supporting them. because they're fighting against Britain now. And why does that put us in an awkward situation? France is fighting Britain now. Why is that an awkward position for us, Katie?
Because when we were fighting Britain, they were our allies.
Okay, when we were fighting Britain, France was our ally. Okay, now France is fighting Britain, and what does Britain have to do with us now? What is the deal with Britain and us today? Not today, 2014, but then. Why do we not want to get involved? Makes sense that we should be on France's side. They helped us. Lindsay?
British trade was too important to
Britain was our #1 trading partner, and that was too important. So we can't take sides. So the United States remained neutral. What does it mean to remain neutral? What is neutral? Leah, what does it mean to remain neutral? Not pick a side, remain impartial. France was our friend during the Revolution. Britain is our #1 trading partner. We can't take sides. It became so important that we become neutral and remain neutral that Congress passed a law forbidding the United States to help either side. Okay, so it was a law that we could not do that. Well, by remaining neutral, that became a problem. The French weren't happy with us, and the British weren't happy with us. So let's talk about what it was like to remain neutral. Both sides were unhappy, but mostly the side that was, the most unhappy was the British. And they made it really difficult for us to remain neutral, because what did they start to do? Because they were so upset with us remaining neutral. Dev?
They began seizing the cargoes.
Yeah, they started seizing our ships that were carrying goods from the West Indies, the French West Indies, and they were seizing our goods. And so it became hard for us to remain neutral. And so Washington sent his Chief Justice over to England for talks and talking to them about seizing our ships. They also hoped to get the British to give up forts. They hoped for us to be able to do some trading in the British West Indies. So John Jay went over there, and they came up with this treaty and called it, obviously, Jay's Treaty. Okay, and in Jay's Treaty, what did it specifically state was going to happen? What did Jay's Treaty state? Abby?
To pay damage for U.S.
Vessels. The British agreed to pay for damaged U.S. vessels. So any vessels or ships that they damaged, they said that they would pay. What else did they say they would do? Hunter, are you taking notes?
Yeah.
Okay. What else did the British agree to do besides paying for our vessels that they damaged? Cooper, what else did the British agree to do?
They agreed to leave the Ohio Valley.
Yeah, they decided we'll leave the Ohio Valley by 1796, so they'll get out of there by a couple of years. They agreed to pay damages for U.S. vessels. However, they did not do one thing that we wanted them to take care of. What did John Jay not get put in that treaty? What did John Jay not get put in that treaty? Hunter? Abby?
The Proctor British West Indies.
What about them?
Open
He was unable to open up the British West Indies for us to be able to trade there. So because he couldn't do that, his treaty became very unpopular with the people. Okay. Well, just like John Jay, there was another guy trying to help the United States, Thomas Pinckney, and he was focusing on what was going on in the frontier. He wanted to reduce tensions in the frontier. So he wrote up a treaty pretty much with Spain. And what did Pinckney's treaty say, Lily?
It said that gave American right to freely travel on the Mississippi River.
Yep, it gave the Americans the right. Spain said, okay, the Americans now can travel free on the Mississippi River without having to pay a custom duty. And that meant that now people can start using the Mississippi River, because before they had to pay this toll down in New Orleans at the port. So now, because we can use that for transportation and trade, people started moving west so that they could now have easier access to the Mississippi and the port of New Orleans. Okay? So, because of Pinckney's treaty, people started heading a lot out west, and so we started to expand more. Okay? So during George Washington's 8-year reign as president, quite a bit happened. We set up a lot of different things within the government. We tried to work on our economy. The interpreting of the Constitution was huge. We secured the Northwest. We put down a rebellion to show the people that we are going to enforce the law. We remained neutral in the French Revolution. 8 years later, George Washington's getting ready to retire. And things are going to change as far as the government. So that'll be the next thing that we'll be talking about. But for Section 2, you're going to be doing a quiz tomorrow, and I have a writing for you I'm going to put up on the board that will be turned in, so don't put it in your journal. Okay? This is due tomorrow, and it's about how the United States remained neutral. Okay? So why do you think it was neutrality was a difficult policy for the United States to maintain? I want you to form your own opinion, but I'm also looking for facts from the book and the notes. Why do you think being neutral was hard for the United States? And I'm talking about being neutral with the French Revolution. Why was that a difficult thing? It was very difficult. So talk about that. That's due tomorrow. We'll take a quiz tomorrow. We'll get started on Section 3. Questions? Yeah, Brennan.